from $121 all the way down to just $64 after news broke that Caitlin Clark won't be playing.
The ticket prices, the demand fell off a cliff.
When you come to Indianapolis, look, this is what everybody's been talking about. Is the largest banner ever.
Caitlin Clark gets hurt, and guess what? Your demand vanishes because people ain't going to pay up.
Indianapolis rolled out the biggest banner in WNBA history, a towering 34-story tribute to Caitlin Clark, draped across the skyline like a coronation robe. But just days later, ticket prices collapsed. Fans boycotted the league's biggest weekend, and downtown businesses were left counting their losses. How did one player's injury trigger a financial disaster that exposed the WNBA's deepest flaws? The real story goes far beyond a groin strain, and what's coming next could shake the league to its core. Indianapolis was supposed to be the epicenter of women's basketball history, a perfect storm of star power, sold-out crowds, and soaring ticket prices.
Really unfortunate that Caitlin Clark missed it. The crowd would have been exploding. The crowd would have been exploding. The arena would have been exploding. Oh man, a big miss as far as the WNBA is concerned.
The 34-story banner of Caitlin Clark on the JW Marriott was more than just an ad. It was a symbol of what this weekend meant. A coronation for the WNBA's new superstar and a celebration of a league that finally felt like it was breaking through. Local businesses geared up for record sales, hotels booked out weeks in advance, and resale tickets reached eye-watering highs, with average prices soaring to $262, the highest in WNBA All-Star history. This wasn't just a game, it was an event, but all of that unraveled in an instant. One announcement, Caitlin Clark's groin injury, sent shockwaves through the market. Ticket prices plummeted by more than 75% in hours. Merch vendors faced thousands in losses. Restaurants and hotels scrambled to adjust for last-minute cancellations. And while fans were reeling,
Story we have been following throughout the past 2 days surrounds the superstar herself, Caitlin Clark, the WNBA star, the Indiana Fever star, Caitlin Clark. She's going to miss all the action on the court.
the real question emerged. How did the WNBA manage to turn its brightest, most anticipated weekend into a public disaster? The answer goes far deeper than one star player sitting out. Behind this collapse lies a pattern of poor officiating, tone-deaf leadership, and a league struggling to protect the very players who drive its success. And what happened next would reveal an uncomfortable truth about just how much the WNBA depends on Caitlin Clark. Indianapolis had been preparing for this moment for months. The city didn't just want to host the WNBA All-Star weekend. They wanted to make history with it. A giant replica All-Star court greeted travelers at the airport. Local restaurants stocked up on supplies and hired extra staff, expecting a flood of visitors. The JW Marriott's 113,000 square foot banner of Caitlin Clark towering over downtown wasn't just a photo op. It was a declaration. This was her city, her moment, and her league's turning point. Tickets had sold out in mere hours when they went on sale. Resale prices skyrocketed.
This year, for the second time ever, the WNBA All-Star Game was supposed to feature an actual star. Normally, this celebration of pretend basketball features players that no one's ever heard of.
With the cheapest seat going for $121 and premium courtside spots fetching thousands. According to TickPick, this All-Star Game was set to break every WNBA ticket price record. A demand surge fueled almost entirely by one name, Caitlin Clark. The buzz was palpable. Everywhere you turned in Indianapolis, her face looked back at you. The "Downtown in my town" slogan draped across that massive banner captured the mood perfectly. This was supposed to be Clark's coronation, a weekend where she would be celebrated as the athlete single-handedly transforming the WNBA's fortunes. But behind all the excitement, there was one uncomfortable reality. The entire weekend was built around a single player. And when news broke that Caitlin Clark wouldn't step on the court, the cracks began to show immediately. July 17th was the moment everything changed.
But when it comes to the vendors in the arena, the shops in the arena, they're not going to have the same amount of people patronize their business as they would if Caitlin Clark was there.
What was supposed to be Caitlin Clark's triumphant weekend in her hometown took a devastating turn when the news hit social media. Clark was out with a groin injury, and almost instantly, the hype that had built for months began to unravel before everyone's eyes. Within hours, the ticket resale market collapsed in real time. The average price for All-Star tickets, which had soared to $262, fell by 75% almost immediately, crashing to just $64. The get-in price that had hovered around $121 dropped to $65, and even at those bargain rates, buyers weren't exactly lining up. People who had bought tickets as investments panicked. Listings flooded the market as desperate sellers slashed prices lower and lower. $100, then $80, then $70, finally bottoming out around $64. Some fans openly admitted they were only coming to see Clark play.
Yeah, I mean, there's a level of physicality that they're able to play with against her. I knew it as an opponent, and I see it as her coach. I'm not exactly sure why, but it just is what it is. And we've got to help her learn to adjust and use it against them in certain ways. We've got to find some ways to make it a little bit easier for her. But the level of physicality overall in our league has been at a different level than it's been for a long time.
With her sidelined, their entire reason for attending was gone. But the ripple effect went far beyond empty seats. Local businesses that had prepped for record crowds, restaurants, hotels, bars, and vendors, were suddenly staring at massive losses. Some reported waves of cancellations. Others realized they'd overstocked for a crowd that wasn't coming. Even Gainbridge Fieldhouse itself, which had sold out every Indiana Fever home game for 2 straight seasons, was now facing empty rows of seats on what was supposed to be the WNBA's biggest stage. This wasn't just a bad break for one weekend. It was a full-scale economic collapse playing out in real time.
How did we get to an All-Star game in Indiana where Caitlin Clark is not healthy enough to play?
And it revealed something that the league's executives would rather not admit. The message from fans was loud and clear. Without Caitlin Clark, this wasn't an All-Star game worth watching. But that left a deeper question looming. How did the WNBA let it get to this point? The answer lies in what had been happening on the court long before July 17th. The seeds of this disaster were planted long before Caitlin Clark's groin injury made headlines. For months, fans, coaches, and analysts had been sounding the alarm about one glaring issue: how Clark was being treated on the court. From the very start of her rookie season, Clark became a target. Opposing players discovered they could push, grab, shove, and hack her with almost no consequences. The refs swallowed their whistles and let the physicality escalate to dangerous levels.
I know as a fan of sports for 60 years now, I know that, no one's ever happy with officiating. All sports deal with it, but we're working hard to make sure we're putting the best product out on the court, and our officiating then follows that.
Clark absorbed 20% of all flagrant fouls in the entire league, an astounding statistic for just one player, and many of those hits didn't even result in penalties. Video after video surfaced online showing defenders hooking her arms, body-checking her, and shoving her into screens without so much as a foul call. Entire fan compilations documented this treatment, fueling outrage on social media. Coaches saw it too. Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White openly called out the double standard, pointing out how teams were allowed to rough up Clark in ways that would never fly against other stars. But this wasn't just a minor officiating issue. It was a pattern, one that had already cost the WNBA before, when Clark missed regular season games earlier in the year due to a quad strain. Ticket prices for those matchups plummeted.
God. So, of course, that is what everybody notices, right? After the meeting, the WWE style.
A Washington game dropped by 47%, and a highly anticipated Chicago matchup fell by 71%. The warning signs were there, but league leadership did nothing. Fans noticed. The players noticed. And then, the inevitable happened. Months of unchecked rough play culminated in Clark's groin injury, the very injury that derailed the WNBA's marquee weekend. Even legendary players like Lisa Leslie recognized the seriousness of Clark's situation. Leslie spoke from personal experience, explaining that groin injuries are among the most frustrating and lingering in sports. They can sideline athletes for months or longer, and even when players return, the pain often lingers indefinitely. And for Clark, who was now expected to power through the rest of the season, rest and full recovery would be almost impossible.
A bunch of players and coaches over the last few days have complained without being fine-worthy about officiating. I just want to see about your thoughts on if officiating is an issue and how it can be improved, because clearly there seems to be problems or disconnect between what players and coaches feel and what officials are actually calling.
But this wasn't simply bad luck. It was the predictable outcome of a league that had failed to protect its biggest star. While other sports marquee players are often given a level of protection by officials, think LeBron James or Patrick Mahomes, Caitlin Clark was left exposed. Every ignored foul, every missed call, every no-call shove contributed to the injury that would eventually crater ticket prices and sink the WNBA's most important weekend. And when it all fell apart, fans looked to the league's leadership for accountability. But what they got instead would make things even worse. When disaster struck, all eyes turned to WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert. This was supposed to be her moment to step up, to acknowledge what fans and players had seen all season long, that the officiating had failed, and it had finally cost the league its biggest star, its biggest event, and millions in revenue. Instead, Engelbert's response poured gasoline on the fire.
To be honest, Tracy, I play tennis and I can still feel that injury linger because I don't know that it ever really goes away. You just learn to manage and play with it,
As players, coaches, and fans loudly voiced frustration over the officiating crisis, Engelbert delivered what felt like a rehearsed corporate non-answer. When asked directly whether refereeing was an issue, she deflected, saying that all sports deal with officiating complaints, and that the league was working to ensure the best product on the court. No mention of Clark. No acknowledgement of the glaring double standard she had faced. No commitment to specific changes. Behind the scenes, Engelbert pointed to a productive and constructive meeting with 40 players and league stakeholders. Corporate jargon that meant absolutely nothing to the angry fans watching ticket prices crash and vendors facing brutal losses. Fans didn't want vague talk about shared goals or ongoing efforts. They wanted accountability. They wanted action. They wanted the league to protect its stars so that this exact situation would never happen again. And perhaps most infuriating of all, while Engelbert downplayed the crisis publicly, the economic carnage in Indianapolis was unfolding in real time. Downtown restaurants, bars, and hotels, all of which had staffed up and stocked up expecting record crowds, were suddenly facing cancellations and empty tables. Merch vendors who had invested thousands into All-Star Weekend memorabilia were now stuck with inventory they couldn't sell. The disconnect between Engelbert's tone and the harsh reality on the ground was staggering, and fans noticed. Across social media, hashtags calling for boycotts began trending. Fans openly criticized Engelbert's inability to confront the officiating problem head-on, accusing her of protecting the league's image instead of fixing the root issue. Her refusal to hold referees accountable wasn't just frustrating. It made the situation worse, deepening fans' anger and driving many away altogether. Her response, or lack thereof, cemented what many fans were already starting to feel, that the league's leadership was completely out of touch, unwilling to protect the players that drove its success, and incapable of learning from its mistakes. And while Engelbert tried to project calm, what was happening behind the scenes next would reveal just how fragile the WNBA's future might be. While league leadership tried to paper over the disaster with corporate talking points, the players themselves were sending a far more powerful message, and it didn't go unnoticed. Several All-Stars arrived at events that weekend wearing shirts that read, "Pay US, what you owe US," a direct shot at the league's long-simmering revenue-sharing fight. The message was clear. Players were no longer willing to stay silent about how much they contributed to the WNBA's sudden surge in popularity, especially when that surge was largely thanks to Caitlin Clark. But the weekend's most surprising moment wasn't on the court. It came courtside. In a move that caught fans and insiders off guard, the New York Liberty's mascot, Ellie, was seen actively recruiting Clark during the All-Star festivities. Cameras caught playful interactions, that quickly sparked viral speculation. Was the Liberty positioning themselves to lure Clark to New York? It wasn't just a mascot goof. In the context of a disastrous All-Star weekend, with Clark sidelined, ticket sales cratering, and fan confidence shaken, this lighthearted moment became symbolic of something bigger. The Liberty's bold, public flotation felt like a subtle but sharp reminder. Some franchises understand the value of a superstar better than the league itself. Rumors immediately began swirling online. Was New York laying the groundwork to one day poach Clark? Could they offer her the media exposure, corporate partnerships, and protection that Indiana, and the WNBA as a whole, had failed to provide? Of course, nothing about Clark's future was official or imminent, but the fact that a mascot making playful recruiting gestures generated more excitement than the All-Star game itself spoke volumes. It underscored a brutal truth. This wasn't just a bad game or a bad weekend. The entire league was now facing a perception problem, that it didn't know how to protect or nurture its most valuable player. And as the Liberty's mascot stole headlines, the All-Star game itself was quietly becoming an afterthought. What fans saw when the ball finally tipped off only confirmed their worst fears. When the All-Star game finally tipped off, it should have been the highlight of the weekend, the ultimate showcase of talent, energy, and excitement. Instead, it felt hollow, like a stage missing its main act. The atmosphere inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse was flat from the start. Without Caitlin Clark, the player everyone had come to see, the game lacked spark. The crowd energy that had made Indiana Fever games electric all season long was gone. Even on television, viewers could feel it. The All-Star game didn't feel like an event, it felt like a scrimmage. To make matters worse, the league had introduced a 4-point shot gimmick designed to spice things up. Instead of real basketball, fans got a glorified layup line with players jacking up deep shots from way beyond the arc and barely playing defense. There was no intensity, no competition, just a collection of players going through the motions. The lack of effort was painfully obvious. No one was diving for loose balls, no one was contesting shots, and no one was treating this like the elite level game it was supposed to be. The pace was frantic, but the substance was missing entirely. And ironically, Caitlin Clark, even while sidelined, was still the most talked about figure in the building. Cameras repeatedly cut to her sitting on the bench in street clothes, smiling politely, but unable to contribute. In her absence, the game's most compelling story became not what was happening on the court, but what was happening around it. Fans sharing empty seat photos on social media, commentators questioning the league's officiating standards, and rumors swirling about Clark's long-term future. Even mainstream sports outlets that had celebrated the WNBA's rise in viewership this season couldn't ignore the optics. The All-Star game was supposed to be the crown jewel of the calendar, proof that the league had arrived. Instead, it exposed just how fragile that success really was. Without Clark, the All-Star game felt more like a sideshow than a serious sporting event. And for fans who had shelled out big money for tickets, hotel rooms, and travel, the disappointment was palpable. But as flat as this game felt, it revealed something even more troubling. How much the league depends on a single player to drive excitement, and just how vulnerable that makes the WNBA's future. What happened in Indianapolis wasn't just a bad weekend. It was a warning shot aimed squarely at the heart of the WNBA's future. For months, league executives had celebrated record viewership, record ticket sales, and soaring merchandise numbers. Headlines praised unprecedented growth, and on the surface, the WNBA appeared to be on the rise like never before. But All-Star Weekend exposed an uncomfortable reality. Almost all that success was being driven by a single player, Caitlin Clark. Her presence packed arenas. Her name dominated media coverage. Her jersey was a bestseller. And when she was suddenly removed from the equation, the entire house of cards collapsed in a matter of hours. This wasn't theoretical anymore. The market spoke loudly. Without Clark, ticket prices cratered, fans stayed home, and local businesses suffered. The All-Star game itself, once positioned as the league's ultimate showcase, felt empty and irrelevant without her. It raised a sobering question for everyone watching, from fans to investors to league officials. Is the WNBA's growth real, or is it simply the Clark effect? Even more troubling for the league were the whispers starting to swirl around Clark's long-term future. While nothing was official, speculation was everywhere. Would Clark someday explore overseas opportunities where she could earn exponentially more? Would she leverage her popularity to force changes in how the league protects its stars? Or would she push for a bigger market move, with teams like the New York Liberty already publicly showing interest? The speculation might have been premature, but the fact that fans were even talking about it revealed how fragile the league's position really is. And hovering over all of this was an unspoken truth. The WNBA's current structure, leadership, and officiating culture simply aren't set up to protect and maximize their biggest asset. This crisis has made that painfully obvious. Without swift action, from fixing officiating to rethinking how the league markets and supports its stars, the WNBA risks losing the very audience that has finally begun to show up in record numbers. Fans are watching closely, so are players, and so are business partners and sponsors who can see exactly what this weekend revealed. The league's meteoric rise isn't built on a broad foundation. It's balanced precariously on the shoulders of one transcendent talent. And unless the league learns from this disaster quickly, what happened in Indianapolis won't just be a fluke. It could become the future. The WNBA thought this weekend would cement its arrival as a major league. Instead, it revealed a painful truth that fans, players, and even critics can now see clearly. Without Caitlin Clark, everything the league has built this season feels fragile, temporary, and dangerously dependent on a single player. The fallout from Indianapolis was bigger than a few empty seats. It was an economic gut punch that rippled through businesses, vendors, and sponsors who had bet on record-breaking crowds. It was a clear verdict from fans who voted with their wallets, walking away the moment their favorite player couldn't take the court. But most of all, it was a public exposure of the league's biggest failure, its inability to protect its stars. Every uncalled foul, every missed whistle, every shove Clark endured this season added up to this moment. The injury wasn't just bad luck, it was the predictable result of a league that refused to listen when fans, coaches, and even players sounded the alarm. Then came the league's response. A flood of corporate platitudes, vague reassurances, and evasive answers. No accountability. No real plan to change the officiating culture that had allowed this to happen. The result? A fan base that is more frustrated than ever. A marquee event that turned into a national embarrassment. And a superstar whose future with the league is already the subject of speculation. This isn't the end of Caitlin Clark's story. If anything, it's just the beginning. But it's also a turning point for the WNBA. The league now faces a stark choice. Confront its failures, protect the players who bring in the fans, and build something sustainable. Or continue down this dangerous path, where a single injury can topple everything. Fans have made their feelings clear. The All-Star Game's empty seats, crashing ticket prices, and flat atmosphere weren't just about one player missing a game. They were about years of frustration boiling over. Will the WNBA finally learn from this expensive, painful lesson? Or will it keep ignoring the warning signs until there's nothing left to save? That's the question every fan is asking now. Like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you don't miss what happens next. Because the future of the WNBA may depend on what this league chooses to do from here.